Imagine it's 4:17 a.m. on May 25, 1942. You find yourself in a windowless concrete chamber deep within the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific headquarters in Honolulu. The war against Japan is raging, yet here it is fought not with guns or planes, but in silence. Only the staccato rhythm of Morse code fills the air, while the acrid scent of burnt dust from overheated vacuum tubes lingers, clinging to your clothes, your skin, your nerves. Rows of men in khaki shirts hunch over typewriters, deciphering fragments of Japanese messages that remain utterly indecipherable. Across the far wall, a blackboard groans under chalked numbers, an unintelligible tapestry, like the remnants of a lost language. Dear friends, if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right now, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments, and make sure to watch the video until the end. For 6 long months, American intelligence has wrestled with the Imperial Japanese Navy's secret code, JN-25B. It is not made of words, but 5-digit numbers, 33,000 of them, shifting daily, a confounding alphabet of pure chaos. Each hour that passes without a breakthrough means another convoy vanishes somewhere in the vast Pacific. Admiral Chester Nimitz knows they are blind. Japanese ships glide across thousands of miles of ocean, striking like ghosts, carriers appearing and disappearing without warning. The Philippines have fallen, Singapore is gone, and the rising sun spreads across the Pacific, while Washington struggles to understand how. In the code rooms of Pearl Harbor and Melbourne, analysts stare at endless streams of numbers, wondering whether Japan has forged the first truly unbreakable cipher in history. Somewhere within those inscrutable sequences lies the next target, an operation identified only by the letters AF. No one knows what AF means, only that Japanese fleets are converging upon it. The pressure is suffocating. Each morning, new intercepts arrive, thousands of digits beamed from Tokyo Naval Headquarters to the fleets stationed at Truk and the Marshall Islands. Teams of mathematicians, linguists, and cryptanalysts toil through shifts, copying, classifying, counting symbols. They detect patterns, repeated 5-digit groups hinting at an additive code system, but the key itself remains invisible. Every promising lead dissolves into noise. Every theory dies under the weight of relentless arithmetic. Men who were once professors and engineers now sit for 18-hour stretches at typewriters, praying for a single recognizable word. Outside, the Pacific slumbers beneath a gray dawn, but inside the room, time stands still. Cigarette smoke swirls above desks as teleprinters rattle out intercepts faster than the analysts can process them. On the northern wall, a map of the Pacific bristles with red strings connecting unknown coordinates. One string points unmistakably to a tiny atoll called Midway. Nimitz suspects it is the target, but suspicion is not proof. Until the code is broken, he cannot risk the last of America's carriers. In that moment, the fate of the war balances on the minds of a few brilliant men and one seemingly impossible cipher. They have machines, punch cards, calculating devices, and yet, no results. What none of them realize is that the first real clue will come not from a mathematician or cryptanalyst, but from a woman at a desk in the corner, a woman who is not supposed to read the messages she types. Her name appears nowhere on any roster of heroes, and her weapon is nothing more than a frayed typewriter ribbon, stained with ink. In the weeks to come, that ribbon will tear open the code Japan believed unbreakable. By spring 1942, Japan is winning, not by brute force, but through mathematics. Every American defeat in the Pacific, from the sinking of the Houston to the fall of Corregidor, is orchestrated through a hidden network of radio signals pulsing across the ocean. The JN-25 naval code is more than a cipher. It is a weapon of precision, a mathematical armor shielding every move of the Imperial Navy from prying eyes. Each message begins with a 5-digit number drawn from a secret codebook of 33,000 entries. That number could represent a word, a phrase, a military concept. Aircraft carrier, attack, refuel, commence operation. Then comes the second encryption, an additive key, a string of random numbers added and subtracted according to tables that change weekly. Even if the enemy captures the codebook without the key, the message remains indecipherable. For half a year, the men of the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific have stared at that gibberish. Operators in Dutch Harbor, Guam, and Australia intercept Japanese traffic, funneling it to Honolulu, where teletype paper piles up like drifting snow. They log over 1,000 messages each week, each thousands of digits long. Every time an analyst searches for a pattern, the additive key shifts, shattering every clue. Cross-eyed from fatigue, they compare column to column, hunting microscopic repetitions that might reveal the hidden structure. But nothing stays steady long enough to confirm anything. Frustration spreads like fever. Commander Joseph Rochefort, the eccentric head of the Honolulu unit, sleeps on a cot amid dictionaries and ashtrays, speaking in riddles and Shakespearean quotations. Yet even he cannot conjure progress. Washington sends more mathematicians with charts, formulas, punch card sorters, but nothing works. "We are fighting an army of ghosts," Rochefort writes in his diary. "We see their shadows in the ether, but never the men who sent them." By May, Japanese traffic surges. Entire squadrons are on the move, converging on a location coded only as AF. The designator appears in dispatches again and again. "Send supplies to AF. Air reconnaissance over AF scheduled for June 3rd. Carrier Division 1 to rendezvous near AF." Analysts suspect AF is Midway, a lonely atoll 1,100 miles northwest of Hawaii, America's last shield before the mainland. But intelligence cannot act on suspicion alone. Nimitz demands proof. Without it, the Pacific Fleet must guess where to fight. In Washington, cryptologists debate whether the code can even be broken before the war ends. The British have cracked the German enigma with machines. JN-25 defies them all. It is too vast, too fluid, built on a logic of chaos. Analysts are on the verge of surrender until a small mistake changes everything. In one corner of the Honolulu operations room sits a row of typewriters, where clerks retype intercepted numbers into clean copies for distribution. Among them is a 24-year-old woman named Margaret Howard. She joined the Navy as a typist, not a codebreaker, and her role is considered purely administrative. Yet she is about to do what no one else can. Imagine watching the same silent miracle unfold every single day. Numbers pouring across the page like an unending river, sometimes flowing in perfect symmetry, sometimes shifting just enough to make you wonder what they're trying to whisper. That was Margaret's world. Her typewriter ribbon, already frayed to a tired sheen of black and purple, caught those repetitions like faint fingerprints. She had no formal training to decode them, yet she felt their pulse. To her eyes, those digits weren't random at all. They resembled a message attempting to break free. The men around her never noticed the quick lift of her gaze toward the paper as she typed, nor the small crease between her brows whenever a particular sequence appeared. 5 digits, then those same 5 again, only separated by a thin scatter of stray characters. In that fragile echo lurked a hairline fracture in Japan's seemingly invincible armor, a mathematical heartbeat that hinted at betrayal. But for now, she remained unseen, just another uniform tucked behind a desk, transcribing pieces of history she wasn't supposed to read. And what gave Japan's system such terrifying power? Its unwavering belief in perfection. It depended entirely on the assumption that its operators would never, under any circumstances, repeat the same additive key twice. Yet human beings always repeat. Always. Somewhere across the Pacific, a weary Japanese radio man, exhausted or distracted, made the tiniest of mistakes. He reused one line of the key. That single slip produced two messages born from the same pattern. One accurate, one contorted. And the faintest reflection of their difference appeared almost invisible on Margaret's worn typewriter ribbon. The irony could have brought a person to their knees. Months of supercomputing, intricate mathematics, and top-level effort had yielded nothing. And yet the essential clue had already passed beneath the fingertips of a secretary, whose name no officer bothered to remember. She did not yet understand what she had touched, nor did the officers who walked past her with blind indifference. But the tide of the Pacific War was preparing to shift. All because of a thin strip of inked fabric worth less than $1. If you've ever believed that wars are shaped only by admirals and generals, pause for a moment. Think again. Sometimes the fate of nations hinges on the unnoticed, the overlooked. Type 2 in the comments if you believe small details can decide the greatest battles. If you disagree, hit the like button and subscribe, because in the next part, you'll discover how one woman's torn typewriter ribbon became the tool that unlocked Japan's most guarded secret. When she arrived in Honolulu, she had no idea that history was already waiting with open hands. Margaret Howard, 24, years old, quiet, careful in the way people become when they sense eyes on them, had been labeled a clerical assistant by the Navy, one of hundreds of women assigned to typing rooms and administrative offices after Pearl Harbor. Officially, they were told they were supporting communications work. Unofficially, none knew that the sheets they handled came straight from Japanese warships. She lived in a converted dormitory near Makiki Heights, waking before dawn each morning. Picture her walking that last mile toward the base while the streets still hid in darkness. The guards barely glanced up as she passed. Hundreds of women came and went daily, pushing endless stacks of paper through the machinery of war. Inside the Fleet Radio Unit building, the noise never relented. Teletype machines hammered out intercepted transmissions from distant outposts. Guam, Dutch Harbor, each strike of the keys echoing like mechanical heartbeats. The air shimmered with the ceaseless hum of fans working overtime to keep decoding equipment from overheating. To Margaret, the entire room smelled of ozone and carbon paper, a metallic scent that seemed to cling to her clothing. Her assignment was straightforward. Take the raw intercept sheets, rows of 5-digit groups, and retype them with precise spacing so analysts could read them without error. She wasn't supposed to interpret, question, or even think. Accuracy was the sole expectation. Intelligence was not part of her job description. But repetition reshapes the mind. And soon she began to notice the patterns. By her second week, certain number groups repeatedly appeared not in identical positions, but with uncanny consistency. Sometimes one digit differed, almost as though the same phrase had been typed twice, but mistyped once. To the analysts, this meant nothing. The flow of Japanese transmissions was enormous. Coincidence was simply part of the landscape. But Margaret had once been a bookkeeper in Chicago. She knew the texture of numbers, the way repetition carried its own kind of meaning. When a pattern emerged, she felt it. The more she typed, the more the digits developed a sort of rhythm beneath her fingers. Her typewriter, an Underwood Standard, had a ribbon so worn that faint shadows of earlier impressions began to bleed through. After hours of typing, ghostly numbers hovered beneath each fresh line, like earlier thoughts refusing to fade. The day she replaced the ribbon, she held the strip to the light and saw those ghosts clearly. the same 5-digit sequence repeated twice, separated only by a few strokes. Each recurrence left a darker trace, as if insisting on being seen. It resembled musical notation, a hidden melody embedded within the machinery. The men around her missed all of it. They moved with military precision, muttering over mathematical tables, cigarettes dangling lazily between their fingers. Margaret, the only woman in her section, understood the unspoken rule. Do not interrupt. So she kept her observations quiet, marking only small pencil dots beside recurring sequences, a private constellation outlining something she could sense but not yet define. Her life became shaped by the rhythm of the code room. 12-hour shifts, lunch eaten from a tin tray over her typewriter, letters from home arriving late and blackened with censorship marks. On Sunday, she scrubbed her uniform in the communal sink and wrote in a notebook she never shared. In those hidden pages, she described her growing fascination with the numbers, the beauty in their structure. It feels alive, she once wrote. Like the ocean tides, they change, but they repeat. One afternoon, a lieutenant dropped a new stack of intercepts on her desk. His brow tightened when he noticed the marked pages she had already completed. "Why are some of these marked?" he asked. Margaret hesitated. "They repeat, sir. I thought it might help." He shrugged, unmoved. "Patterns don't matter, Miss Howard. Not unless the math proves them." He walked away before she could say another word. His dismissal stung, but it didn't slow her. That night, when her shift ended, she lingered behind under the pretense of cleaning her machine. With the lights dimmed, she unspooled the ribbon once more and stretched it between her fingers. Under the soft buzz of fluorescent light, the alternating impressions shimmered. Numbers upon numbers, echoes inside echoes. And suddenly, the truth struck her. These weren't random at all. They formed cycles. Every 12 lines, the same clusters returned. It was as though the Japanese operators were transmitting in a rhythm only she had learned to hear. She did not yet realize she was observing the repetition of additive keys, the fatal mathematical flaw that would one day unseal Japan's entire code. All she knew was this: the repetition was real, and she was the only one who had seen it. The next morning, Margaret made a decision that would change the course of history. Instead of discarding the torn ribbon from her typewriter, she carefully wound it into an envelope, marked it used, and tucked it into her drawer. At first, it was just a fragment of her daily work, a minor mishap. But over the following days, she began to notice something extraordinary. As she compared the marks she had made on her pages with the timestamps of intercepted messages, patterns started to emerge. Transmissions from Tokyo to Truk repeated the same numeric echoes that seemed to imprint themselves on the ribbon. Tentatively, she brought her observations to one of the younger analysts, Lieutenant Davis, a communications officer known for his curiosity. "It's probably nothing," she said, showing him the marked pages. "But these groups, they line up." Davis frowned, studying the sequences. Could it be coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. He promised he would mention it to Commander Rochefort. Hours passed, and Margaret returned to her desk, unsure if she had overstepped her place. Then, near midnight, Davis returned. Not alone, but with Commander Rochefort himself. Rumpled, half awake, the commander examined the pages and then the ribbon. His eyes narrowed. "You say this came from yesterday's intercept?" She nodded. A faint smile touched his face, the expression of a man who had been searching for light in a tunnel, finally seeing a spark. "Keep everything exactly as it is," he said. "Do not throw another ribbon away." In that moment, the woman who wasn't supposed to read the code became part of the team working to break it. To Margaret, it was still just a strange rhythm she couldn't ignore. To Rochefort, it was the first tangible crack in an armor of numbers. It all began on an ordinary morning, when the air inside the radio building felt heavier than the ocean outside. Margaret typed a new batch of intercepted signals, Tokyo to Carrier Division 1, her fingers moving on instinct. 5 digits, space, 5 digits, return. And then, suddenly, the rhythm broke. The typewriter jammed mid-line with a sharp metallic snap. She froze, lifting the platen, and saw the ribbon had torn straight through its center. The inked fabric dangled like a severed artery. She reached for a spare ribbon, but something about the tear stopped her. Along the frayed edge, faint mirrored images of numbers shimmered where the ink had struck twice. 2 sequences lay side by side, almost identical, differing by a single digit in the middle. Margaret held the ribbon closer to the light. For the first time, she saw the flaw's shape. At first, she thought it a coincidence, just another smudge from overuse. But when she compared it to the original pages she had typed before the break, the same pattern appeared again. Pairs of 5-digit groups repeated, offset by that single-digit difference. Driven by instinct, she pulled older pages from the filing stack, ones completed days earlier, and the rhythm echoed there too. It wasn't random. It was mechanical, consistent, measured, almost musical. Margaret brought the torn ribbon to Lieutenant Davis. He examined it under his magnifier, muttering numbers to himself. 12-line interval, he said, always 12 apart. Comparing it to the transmission logs, the math fit perfectly. Japanese stations rotated frequencies every 12 hours. "This can't be chance," he whispered. "They're reusing the same additive sequence." He turned to her. "Do you realize what this means?" Margaret didn't yet. To her, it was still just a pattern. But Davis understood. Repetition was death to any cipher. The Japanese code depended on randomness, each message encrypted with a unique key. Repeat one key, even by accident, and 2 messages could be subtracted from each other, canceling the encryption and exposing the underlying structure. And the proof of that fatal echo was stretched across the frayed ribbon of a secretary's typewriter. Davis carried the ribbon straight to Commander Rochefort's office. The commander had been awake 30 hours, fueled by coffee and stubborn will. He leaned forward silently as Davis laid the ribbon on the desk. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a dry, tired laugh that startled everyone in the room. "Gentlemen," he said, "we've been looking for a door. This may be the keyhole." He ordered a full copy of the affected intercepts and told his analysts to prepare differential tables for subtraction analysis. For the first time in months, the room stirred with energy. Margaret watched from her desk as mathematicians and linguists swarmed the evidence she had stumbled upon. They cut strips of the ribbon, mounted them under glass, and compared the ghostly imprints to newly printed intercepts. When they subtracted one sequence from another, patterns emerged, numerical residues corresponding to fixed Japanese words. Aircraft Attack Division. Not a full translation, but proof that JN-25 could bleed. Word of the discovery spread quickly across the intelligence network, from Honolulu to Washington. Skeptics dismissed it as luck, but in war, luck is currency, and Rochefort was ready to spend it. He ordered his team to build a master table of repeated additive groups, using Margaret's markings as a guide. Thousands of partial keys were cataloged, slowly reconstructing the Japanese codebook, one word at a time. Every night, Margaret typed the findings, aligning numbers with the precision of obsession. She no longer felt like a clerk. She was part of something vast and dangerous. Days blurred into nights, the sound of typewriters and teleprinters merging into a single endless hum. Each discovery brought adrenaline, each dead end, exhaustion. She rarely left the building, sleeping on a cot in a side office, her dreams swimming with numbers like fish through water. Each morning, she reached for the torn ribbon still folded carefully in her pocket, proof that mistakes could matter. Not everyone welcomed her presence. One afternoon, a senior analyst confronted Rochefort. "You're basing operational intelligence on a clerk's observation," he said. "That's reckless." Rochefort didn't flinch. "Reckless," he replied, "is ignoring the truth because it came from the wrong person." He walked away before the conversation could continue, leaving Margaret alone with her thoughts and her typewriter. Ribbon, a fragile strip of cloth that had become an emblem of quiet defiance. It reminded her that war recognized no rank, no gender, only results. By the first week of June, the painstakingly reconstructed tables were beginning to bear fruit. Coherent fragments emerged from the chaos, like islands appearing in a stormy sea of numbers. One translated dispatch contained the phrase, "AF will run short of water." Rochefort suspected AF meant Midway, but Nimitz demanded absolute confirmation. To test the theory, Rochefort devised a brilliant experiment. He instructed the garrison at Midway to send an uncoded message reporting a failure in their water system. 2 days later, Tokyo replied with an encrypted order. "AF reports water shortage." The confirmation was unequivocal. Midway was the target, and Japan was walking straight into a trap. Margaret read the summary pinned on the bulletin board the following morning. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, even tears from some men proof that months of relentless work had finally yielded results. And she, a quiet clerk with no formal cryptographic training, had been part of it. Her accidental discovery had helped reveal Japan's next move. The torn ribbon, now carefully sealed in an envelope labeled evidence, rested in Rochefort's safe. Passing her in the hallway, he stopped, gave a rare smile, and said, "Good work, Miss Howard. The Pacific owes you a drink." Outside, the sun blazed over Honolulu Harbor. Carriers prepared to sail. The war that had once seemed impossibly distant now pivoted on the persistence of one woman and a fragment of ribbon she refused to discard. If you think accidents are only failures, reconsider. Type 4 in the comments if you believe a single mistake can save thousands of lives. Otherwise, hit like and subscribe, because in the next part, you'll see how that torn ribbon orchestrated the greatest ambush in naval history. The race began in silence. No announcement, no fanfare, no one leaving the building once it started. By June 1st, 1942, the fleet radio unit in Honolulu had become a sealed world of paper, smoke, and numbers. Daylight vanished behind blackout curtains. Clocks lost their meaning. Ink and fatigue hung in the air like dense fog. Every desk groaned under stacks of intercepted signals, brittle towers trembling at the slightest footstep. Each page carried a fragment of Japanese intent. Somewhere in those stacks lay the timing and trajectory of the next blow. Rochefort's team operated in overlapping 12-hour shifts. Work never ceased. At the center of it all sat the master additive table, the partial key made possible by Margaret's discovery. Analysts laid translucent sheets over it, aligning repetitions, canceling out numbers with the precision of surgeons excising a tumor. The room buzzed with pencil scratches and typewriter clatter. Whenever a message resolved into even a handful of intelligible words, someone would shout, "Hold that pattern!" and a small crowd would gather to verify the math. Margaret worked alongside Lieutenant Davis, retyping decoded fragments into coherent lines. Her torn ribbon had been replaced, yet she kept the original in her drawer, its edges still darkened with ink and fingerprints. Around her, the tempo intensified. Intercepts arrived every hour, still warm from the radio shack. Some were routine logistics. Others came from Tokyo High Command, marked with priority codes for major fleet operations. Slowly, the puzzle pieces fell into place. the enigmatic AF, now connected with Carrier Division 1 and Air Group 6. Phrases like Operation MI and Main Body Rendezvous east of AF confirmed Japan's largest carrier force was moving. Analysts cross-referenced these with weather and tide reports. Everything pointed to an attack in the first week of June. Red eyes, trembling hands, voices hoarse from whispering numbers. Exhaustion etched itself into every face. Rochefort's uniform hung loose. He had stopped shaving. Yet beneath that fatigue burned purpose and near religious certainty. They were finally ahead of the enemy. When a translator identified a sequence pointing to Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship, the room erupted in cheers. For months, those 5 carriers had haunted Allied command like ghosts. Now, they had coordinates. Meanwhile, across the vast Pacific, the Imperial Japanese Navy steamed toward Midway. 4 fleet carriers, 2 battleships, over 200 aircraft. Confidence was absolute. The code was unbreakable. Their plans were invisible. Nagumo's officers toasted nightly in the wardroom, unaware that a basement in Honolulu already held near-perfect knowledge of their schedule. On June 3rd, Rochefort compiled the findings into a single report. Enemy striking force, approximately 4 carriers approaching Midway from the northwest. Attack expected at dawn on June 4th. The message went straight to Admiral Nimitz at Pearl Harbor. He read it twice, then once more in silence. He looked at his operations officer and said, "We'll be waiting for them." Orders flashed across the Pacific. Carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown turned toward Midway. Margaret watched staff officers carry the report from the room. She realized she had not stepped outside in 4 days. For a moment, she felt weightless, tethered only to the pulse of the machines. She thought of the ribbon, the fragile chain that had begun with a single human error on a Japanese transmitter, a torn strip of cloth on her typewriter. And now, entire fleets of steel were moving because of it. That night, the team gathered for coffee in the hallway. No one spoke of victory. They knew how quickly intelligence could fail. A single misread digit could send an armada into empty water. Still, they had done everything possible. Margaret sat quietly, staring at the floor. Davis broke the silence. "You realize," he said, "if this works, we'll never be allowed to talk about it." She nodded. "That's all right," she replied, "as long as it works." Hours later, at 6 a.m. on June 4th, the first report arrived from Midway. "Many planes heading your way, bearing 320 distance, 150 miles. The Japanese had arrived exactly as predicted. The American carriers were in position. The radio room erupted into controlled chaos. Yet Margaret typed updates with steady hands, despite the tremor in her chest. She wasn't on the bridge of a ship, but she could feel the battle unfold across the ocean. Reports poured in, first from Midway's airfields, then from carrier scouts. Enemy sighted. Attack launched. Hit on Akagi. Each line echoed the numbers she had once typed blindly. Now they carried urgent, undeniable meaning. The invisible war of codes had transformed into a real one of fire and steel. When news arrived that all 4 Japanese carriers were burning, the room fell utterly silent. No cheers, no movement. The weight of it hung like a physical presence. Rochefort removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, the enormity of the moment finally sinking in. "It's over," Rochefort said quietly. They had walked straight into it. The trap set. The plan executed. Davis turned to Margaret, his voice barely a whisper. "Your ribbon did this." She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "Theirs did." Outside, distant cheers rose through Pearl Harbor as the news spread. But inside the dim, smoke-stained code room, the team barely stirred. For them, victory wasn't a roar of glory. It was a fragile, almost unreal sense of relief. For once, the math had been on their side. That evening, When Margaret finally stepped outside, the air smelled of salt and rain. She looked up at the Pacific sky, imagining the ships returning home. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. Japan's advance had been broken. The tide had turned all because the perfect code had stumbled once. And one woman had been paying attention. If you believe that wars are decided long before the first shot is fired, by people whose names never appear in headlines, type 5 in the comments. If you think victory only belongs to those who pull the trigger, hit the like button. The morning after the battle, the Pacific still burned. Smoke columns rose from the wreckage of 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, each a floating city consumed by its own fuel. From 1,000 miles away, Margaret and the team in Honolulu received the first decrypted reports. The language was cold, clinical. Enemy carrier force destroyed. Own losses. Yorktown damaged, now abandoned. Midway secure. No words could capture what had happened. In just 5 hours, Japan's supposedly invincible strike force had been annihilated. The same fleet that had leveled Pearl Harbor 6 months before was gone, broken by a handful of pilots and a code book that had bled through a typewriter ribbon. In the code room, there was no cheering. Analysts sat at their desks, reading incoming signals as if afraid to believe them. Commander Rochefort paced silently, face pale, body hollowed by weeks of black coffee and instinct. As confirmation arrived from radio intercepts, patrol reports, and carrier transmissions, he exhaled for the first time in days. "They did it," he whispered. "Every last one of them." For historians, the Battle of Midway would later appear as a miracle of timing. Japan lost 248 aircraft, more than 3,000 sailors, and 4 carriers it could never replace. The United States lost 307 men and 1 carrier, Yorktown, but gained the strategic initiative that would carry it across the Pacific. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japan was on the defensive, and it had begun with intelligence, with the ability to see the enemy's invisible moves. Margaret read each after-action report as it arrived, typing summaries for Washington. The details were brutal. Deck fires, ammunition explosions, pilots trapped in cockpits. She imagined the smoke, the noise, the chaos, but reminded herself that every death on those burning ships meant thousands saved elsewhere. The math of war was cruel, yet for the first time, the numbers favored them. Still, there was no celebration in Honolulu. Work continued. Even as victory cables arrived, new intercepts flowed from Japanese bases, regrouping for counterattacks. Margaret typed through the night, ink-stained fingers flying over keys. When she looked up at dawn, the others slept at their desks, and the radio still hissed with static. The world had changed, but their room had not. That afternoon, Rochefort gathered the team for a brief meeting. He thanked them, but his tone remained somber. "What we did here stays here," he said. "No one, no press, no family, no letters home. If anyone asks how we knew, you say we were lucky." His voice broke slightly. History would have to wait for the truth. The victory at Midway was immediately classified. Decrypted messages, additive tables, even the existence of the Honolulu code room were sealed under naval secrecy. For Margaret, the silence was harder than the work. She had imagined a medal, a line in a report, maybe even a handshake. Instead, she was told to destroy her notes. Rochefort himself locked the torn ribbon in a safe labeled operational evidence, "Do not remove." She watched it vanish into darkness. Weeks later, theaters back home celebrated Midway as a triumph of courage and naval power. Headlines praised admirals, pilots, and the luck of the sea. No one mentioned codebreakers, and certainly not a woman in a typing pool. Margaret clipped a newspaper photo of the burning Japanese carriers and folded it into her journal. Beneath it, she wrote, "Sometimes victory has no name. The strategic effect was immediate and irreversible. Japan could no longer mount large-scale offensives. Its elite pilots, veterans of Pearl Harbor, were gone. The United States seized the initiative, building ships faster than Japan could sink them, pushing across the Central Pacific toward the Philippines. Every subsequent victory, from Guadalcanal to the Marianas, traced its lineage back to the numbers cracked in Honolulu. The intelligence gathered at Midway became a blueprint for Allied code-breaking worldwide. From U-boats in the Atlantic to German Enigma traffic in Europe. But for those who had done the work, there was only quiet. Rochefort was transferred, his role obscured by politics. Lieutenant Davis returned to Washington. Margaret remained in Honolulu until the end of 1943, still typing intercepts, still forbidden to speak of what she had seen. The machinery of war swallowed her back into anonymity. Sometimes, late at night, she would pause between pages and glance at the empty drawer where the ribbon had once been. Did it still exist? Or had it been discarded like every other expendable tool of war? To her, it wasn't just inked fabric. It was proof that perfection is an illusion, that even the mightiest empire can fall because someone somewhere pressed the wrong key. In Washington, analysts began compiling the official Midway record. Reports credited improved intelligence coordination, but the name of the woman who first spotted the pattern never appeared. Her story, like the ribbon, vanished into the archives. For decades, the myth persisted. Midway was won by luck. No one asked where that luck came from. Years later, when the files were declassified, a historian noticed a single line in a faded 1942 memo. Observation by female clerical staff led to discovery of additive repetition in JN-25 traffic. No signature, no date, no photograph, just a faint trace-like ghost numbers on an old typewriter ribbon. If you believe heroes are sometimes hidden behind silence, that victory often belongs to those history forgets. Type 6 in the comments. If you think only the famous names matter, hit the like button. And subscribe, because in the next and final part, you'll see what became of Margaret after the war and how one woman who changed history was almost erased by it. When the war finally ended in August 1945, the code room fell silent for the first time in 3 years. Teleprinters were switched off, blackout curtains were pulled back, and sunlight spilled across desks, scarred with ink and cigarette burns. For Margaret Howard, the sound of quiet was almost unbearable. She sat at her typewriter, fingers poised, waiting for messages that would never come. Outside, Honolulu erupted in celebration ships blasting horns, sailors flooding the streets, strangers dancing in the rain. Inside, she filed her last report, signed a non-disclosure oath forbidding her from ever speaking of her work, removed her uniform, packed her notebooks, and went home. In Chicago, the war in the Pacific was a story no one wanted to hear. People preferred to forget. Margaret found work as a secretary at an insurance firm, a job demanding the same relentless precision, the same endless typing, yet stripped of the urgency that had pulsed through her hands in Honolulu. Her co-workers spoke of ration cards and baseball. When she mentioned her time stationed in Hawaii, they smiled politely, assuming she had been a nurse or a clerk or some other mundane role. She let them believe it. The truth was impossible to convey. How could she explain that she had helped turn the tide of the largest war in human history, all because a typewriter ribbon had torn in exactly the right place? Years passed. The machines changed. The world forgot the language of ciphers. Margaret married a quiet man who worked in shipping. She raised 2 children, never speaking of her time in the Navy. On her dresser, She kept a single keepsake, an old Underwood typewriter key, polished smooth from years of touch. Sometimes, when the house was empty and silent, she would type rows of meaningless numbers. The sound carried the same mechanical heartbeat she had once followed through nights of war, and for a moment, the past returned with every tap. In 1960, she read in the newspaper that the Battle of Midway had been won through brilliant naval strategy and American luck. There was no mention of the code breakers in Honolulu, no mention of Rochefort, and certainly no mention of her. She clipped the article and tucked it into a box marked 1942. Beneath it, she placed a photograph of a young woman in uniform, eyes steady, expression unsmiling, staring at the camera. On the back, a caption read, "Fleet Radio Unit Honolulu Classified." Decades later, after her husband's death, she moved into a small apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. By then, the war was firmly relegated to history books. Movies and documentaries recounted Midway as a battle of aircraft and admirals. Sometimes she watched them late at night, whispering corrections no one would ever hear. "You're missing the real story," she murmured to the flickering screen. It wasn't luck, it was ink. In 1982, as the Navy declassified portions of the JN-25 files, an aging historian named John Tolman visited her. He had tracked down surviving members of the Honolulu unit and found her name buried in a personnel roster. She opened the door to find a man holding a stack of yellowed papers. "Mrs. Howard," he said, "I think you helped win the Battle of Midway." She smiled faintly. "I typed some numbers," she said. "That's all." He asked to record an interview. She refused. "It was a team," she said, "and the ribbon's long gone." Margaret Howard died in 1989 at the age of 71, without ever receiving official recognition. 3 years later, when additional records were released, her tiny annotation marks, pencil dots, beside repeated number groups, appeared in the surviving intercept copies, exactly as she had recorded in her notebooks. Naval historians finally acknowledged that those patterns had led to the discovery of additive key repetition, the first step toward breaking JN-25. By then, the woman who had seen the flaw was long gone. Today, her name appears only once in the archives, on a faded duty roster. Howard, M., clerical staff, Frupac, Honolulu. Next to it, someone had written a single word in pencil: retired. The original torn ribbon, labeled Evidence Number 14, remains locked inside a climate-controlled vault at the National Cryptologic Museum. Visitors pass by without noticing, unaware that this thin strip of fabric changed the course of the Pacific War. History often remembers the men who gave the orders, not the women who gave them meaning. Yet, in those ghostly imprints of ink, you can still see her fingerprints. Quiet proof that even the smallest act of attention can rewrite the world. If you believe that ordinary people can shape history, even when no one remembers their names, write 7 in the comments right now. If you think history belongs only to those in the headlines, hit the like button. And if stories like this move you, stories of courage hidden behind silence, subscribe. This channel exists to keep their voices alive, one forgotten hero at a time.